Good morning, friends. My name is Avinash Agarwal. I welcome you all to Ecoholics YouTube channel. In this lecture, we'll be discussing with you important current affairs from 6th May 2024 pertaining to Indian economics and what is happening around the global economy. So we have three articles today that we want to discuss with you. First one is an optimistic article regarding what has been going well with the Indian economy in the last 5 to 7 years and how we can kind of position ourselves for becoming a $30 trillion economy by 2047. In the second article, we explore the re-emergence of state with its industrial policy as a tool to be able to guide national development. So this tool of industrial policy was banished somewhere in 1980s as Washington Consensus became popular, but this tool is making a very strong comeback, and we will be seeing and talking about that comeback in this second article. In the third article, which is a brief article, we'll talk about what Warren Buffett feels or thinks about artificial intelligence. Of course, artificial intelligence as a technology is here to stay, but what important stakeholders who understand a lot about economy, who understand a lot about how productions are done, what they feel, what they think, what they say, makes a very important input insofar as the development and so far as the discourse around these technologies are concerned. So these are the three articles that we'll be discussing today in this particular lecture. If there is absolutely any doubt that you have, if there is anything that you would like to ask, please feel free to use the comment section of our chat box. So far as the note of this particular lecture is concerned, so it will be available on our app. You can download our app, register yourself, and this note will be made available to you, right? So the mechanism is that you have to register yourself, you have to enroll yourself into this course, right, which is basically a free course, study material. You have to go to the study material section, and in the study material section you will be able to find this current affairs downloads PDFs, and you will be able to download the current affairs notes that I'm using, these notes that I'm using, right? So that's the mechanism. Again, you will not encounter any paywall, you will not encounter any obstructions when you do this particular process. It's going to be very seamless, right? So that will be very helpful for you in being able to download these PDFs, and I would advise that you please revise these PDFs in a timely manner, so that once you have watched the lecture, once the basic understanding is there, and once, let us say, you revise it a couple of times, and this will become a part of your permanent memory, and you will be able to use it in your answers, whether written answers or oral answers in the interview. It will be very helpful, right? So let us start our discussion. Let us talk about this first article. Again, this is a very optimistic, very goody article written by Group CEO, MD of the Mahindra Group, right, who also happens to be the leader at FICCI. All right. So basically, this article says that the corporates in India, or the industries in India, they have an exciting opportunity as the country travels and becomes, let us say, a Viksit Bharat or a developed country, right? So this article, it starts by talking about the variety of challenges that we have faced, right? So for instance, just hold on for a second. Yeah. So this article talks about the numerous challenges that the world has seen. Like, for instance, pandemic was a huge challenge. Economic uncertainty around, let us say, price rise, around, let us say, growth levels, right? So economic uncertainty is a huge challenge. Geopolitical shocks are a huge challenge. Like, for instance, Russia suddenly attacks Ukraine, Israel attacks Palestine, Iran attacks Israel, right? North Korea is ever belligerent, right? So there are a lot of geopolitical shocks that are there. And of course, there is rapid technological change which is happening right now, right? Just as we speak, technology is changing like anything, right? So these are the challenges of the past and the present that we are facing. And of course, India has been able to navigate these challenges, and we are poised to become the third largest economy over the next 5 years. And we will be adding more GDP every year than the combined European Union together. That means that India's growth of 7 to 8% will produce an increase in GDP, which will be greater than the contribution made by the European Union. So that is the kind of heft that the Indian economy is now going to acquire. Large part of the world's growth, large part of the world's increase in GDP is going to be contributed by India, right? So if, let us say, the world is growing by, let's say, 3%, so who has contributed how much to that 3%? So you will see that India will contribute around 16 to 17% of that 3% at least, right? So that's the kind of contribution that the Indian economy is going to make to the global economy going ahead, right? Of course, government has taken a lot of policy steps. They have taken a lot of timely decisions, and the author believes that this has helped in engendering inclusive growth. It has helped in developing and deepening a digital mindset, right? And we have been able to put into place a debt management, which is commendable, right? So the author believes that we have witnessed steady growth, fiscal discipline, we have a resilient banking sector, and we have also provided some kind of a support to our disadvantaged sections of our society, right? So these are some of the important steps, right? Now, what are the major outcomes? Let us very quickly start discussing about the major outcomes that we have seen in the last 7 to 10 years. So the first thing that gets highlighted, and which is actually very true in my opinion too, is that infrastructure development in India is happening a breakneck speed, friends. Never before has this kind of money been pumped into infrastructure. Never before has there been this kind of an emphasis on infrastructure development, at least in the recent last 2 or 3 decades, right? I mean, of course, when the country became independent and we started 5-year planning and we started putting serious money into the development of PSUs, we were doing very well at that point of time. But if we speak about in the last 2 to 3 decades, infrastructure development is like very, very strong right now. Like for instance, national highway construction, right? So it has increased from 12.1 kilometers per day to 28.3 kilometers per day. If you talk about rural connectivity for roads, that is at a very high level of 99%. If you look at metro rail projects, so they have reached 20 cities. If you see the broad gauge railway network, it has been electrified. 94% of it has been electrified, and 74 airports have been operationalized. And going ahead, the way things are progressing, we are developing more airports. We are reopening airports that were shut down earlier, and this number can only increase. If you look at the Gati Shakti National Master Plan, so we have connected 35 government departments, right? Why is this connection very, very important? Because it helps bring about better coordination. It helps bring about interlocked policy making and decision making, so that there are no unnecessary delays because one particular department or a ministry is holding up work, right? So far as infrastructure is concerned, these 3 points have been highlighted. If you watch these discussions on a regular basis, and if you read current affairs with me on a regular basis, you will see that we'll keep building things up, right? That we will keep building. So if you take these 3 points of infrastructure and never forget them again, there is a very good likelihood that a couple of days down the line, I will speak about infrastructure again, and probably I will highlight few more points which I may not have highlighted in this particular article, which will then get added to your permanent memory. And then over a period of time, you will see that we keep building our understanding, knowledge, awareness across multiple domains of economics, current affairs, so much so that when we face the examination, we will have a very strong arsenal of current affairs pointers ready to be able to support our arguments, to be able to strengthen our answers. That is the kind of approach that we are going to take, right? Secondly, government has taken steps to boost manufacturing. For instance, the production linked incentive scheme, it covers 14 sectors. It has attracted investments approximately of 1.03 trillion rupees by November 2023. Trillion rupees means 100 lakh crores, right? So 103 lakh crores is approximately where we are standing, right? So that kind of investment has come in. It has generated a huge amount of production and sales of 8.61 trillion rupees, right? And employment generation to the order of 678,000 people have been employed. If we speak about the ease of doing business, so a variety of steps have been taken. Please make sure that you are able to note down these steps and you are able to cite them in your answers and build upon them. Like for instance, we have liberalized foreign investment rules. We have made it easier, more convenient for foreign investment to enter into our country. We have a unified tax system by the name of GST, which is making compliance with the indirect taxes much more easier in India than what was happening in the past. Of course, there are issues in GST that needs to be rationalized, that needs to be corrected. That's for sure, right? But the important point is that we now have a better system in place than what we were having, let us say, earlier. So far as compliance is concerned, you are aware that not being compliant with a lot of laws, rules and regulations invited a criminal offense or a criminal penalty. So there is no point in doing that. White collar professionals making mistakes in their day-to-day operations, You don't need to charge a criminal offense upon them, right? So 3,600 rules, they have been freed of criminal failure risk or criminal offense. 41,000 rules have been reduced by a variety of ministries. We have a Jan Viswas Bill 2023, which has been passed by the Parliament, which will help in engendering greater trust, greater coordination, greater communication, greater transparency between the government and the businesses, right? We also have a national single window system, which will help in, the G2B interface, right? It will be easier for you as a business to take clearances. It will be easier for the government to ask for a variety of documents that it needs to offer you clearances. So life will be easier for both stakeholders involved, right? And of course, easier business exits have been made possible because of insolvency and bankruptcy code, right? So lenders take a haircut. Those who had invested, they bear some kind of a burden, and eventually you see that stalled assets and incomplete assets and productive assets, but which are dysfunctional right now, they again re-enter into the production stream, which is helpful for the economy, right? So these are the positive steps so far as ease of doing business is concerned. Next, the author speaks about digital revolution. So we have spoken about infrastructure, we have spoken about ease of doing business, right? We have spoken about compliances becoming that much more easier. We have spoken about manufacturing, right? So these are the important steps. Now, digital revolution. So there is a massive explosion of digital revolution in India because of this JAM Trinity, Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, Mobile, JAM Trinity. So this was a term that was coined by Arvind Subramanian when he was the chief economic advisor in one of the economic surveys that he had written, right? So JAM Trinity is very helpful. It is helping in last mile targeting of benefits, right? So the government is able to send across money to women in households. They are able to send money to farmers. They are able to send scholarships to children. They are able to send old age pension to people who are of old age. And there is a huge reduction in leakage that is happening. There is a significant increase in transparency. There is a significant increase in the effectiveness of these transfers that is being seen, right? So that's a very good thing, JAM Trinity, right? There is a national digital literacy mission which is ongoing. There is an ONDC which is getting developed. I don't know if you all have used ONDC, but my friends who have used ONDC, they tell me that deliveries are as good as in, let us say, a Swiggy or a Zomato, and the kind of deals and the kind of offers that you get is much better on ONDC as of now, right? That is the kind of reporting that I got. So maybe you want to give ONDC a try, right? There is a government e-marketplace. So what is GEM? So let's say that you are an MSME and you want to sell to the government. So how can you do that? So earlier you had to go to a variety of offices, fill up a variety of forms, sit through a variety of physical auctions, face a lot of lack of transparency, face a lot of corruption, and so on and so forth, right? And even as a buyer, as a government, right, the procedure was huge, right? So PSUs, they themselves had to, do a lot of paperwork and waste a lot of man hours in procurement, right? Now, what government e-marketplace has done is that this has made this entire G2B transaction very, very smooth. That it's all online, it's all electronic, it is fully transparent, right? Of course, there are issues in GEM as well, but GEM has made government business or doing business with government a lot more easier for MSMEs, right? So government wants to procure more and more from Indian MSMEs, and that is happening because of GEM, right? So that's again a very positive step, which kind of empowers the MSMEs and helps make government's life easier. We also have this Jan Dhan Yojana, right? So 2 trillion rupees have been deposited in these accounts. 500 million people have benefited, right? So when these Jan Dhan accounts were being opened initially around 7-8 years ago, so there was a lot of hue and cry that why is this required? Will these accounts be used? What's the purpose? You're forcing it, right? The account opening should be organic. It is going to be a cost burden upon the PSUs, and so on and so forth. While the naysayers may be correct to a certain extent, but definitely these Jan Dhan accounts have deepened the kind of financial inclusion that India has seen. It has made targeting of subsidies possible. It has made targeting of pension schemes and insurance schemes and so on and so forth possible, right? Of course, there is a lot more saturation that needs to be done. A lot more people need to be made aware of these things and made actual beneficiaries of these schemes. But the path ahead is definitely wide open for good work to be done. Ease of living has been improved. Delivery of services to people has improved. So there is universal sanitation. right? There is Ayushman Bharat scheme for 340 million plus citizens. Pension and banking is available. Smoke-free kitchens, 100 million plus women have been given free gas connections. Pipe water is being made available to rural houses as well as urban houses not having this supply. So 140 million plus families now have access to clean tap water. Housing efforts have been taken through Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. So 40 million plus families have pakka houses. So we envision ourselves to be a 30 trillion plus economy by 2047. For that, the manufacturing sector needs to command 25% of GDP. So the manufacturing sector needs to grow 16 times, export needs to grow 11 times. This is not going to happen on its own. We need to take a variety of steps to boost manufacturing. In the second article, we'll actually talk about manufacturing in India, right? So we need to take R&D, production at scale, digitalization, skill development, and take a holistic approach. We really need to invest heavily in this sector. We need to create an ecosystem whereby we can actually solve the pain points of our investors. We can actually solve the pain points of our business community, because right now those pain points are not getting solved, is what the second article will tell you, friends. We are focusing on a lot of high-tech sectors such as defense, electronics, and semiconductors, right, which is a very good thing. Apart from that, we are going to be the 7th country in the world in terms of being affected by climate change, and that's a huge problem. And the author rightly believes that there is a possibility that you can create a business model out of this problem, right? That, like, for instance, renewables, electric vehicles, green cities, sustainable cities, resilient cities. These are the requirements for the next 25, next 50, next 100 years, right? So we can actually make business models out of these issues, which are actually helping us mitigate climate change or adapt to climate change, and they can actually become business models, right? So that's where the opportunity lies for India Inc. We need to enhance our judicial capacity. Right now in India, we have only 20 people. We have 20 judges per 1 million people, which is too low, right? So as a result of which, as simple a task as enforcing a contract can take up to 4 years in the annals of judiciary, right? So we definitely need to augment our judicial capacity as well as deploy technology to make efficient utilization of our resources, right? And definitely we need to spread the benefits of economic prosperity far and wide. The author speaks about two communities. One is that of farmers and other is that of women. So we need to make sure that farm productivity and farm incomes are in the right direction. They are improving in the right direction. And secondly, India has one of the worst female labor force participation rates as of now. We really need to do something about it, because a bird with one wing cannot fly high in the sky, right? So that's the basic idea that we need to keep in mind. So that's the entire gist and summary of this article. So is this clear, guys? Everybody who is present, good morning to all of you. Can you please just type hi in the comment section so that I can see who is present? I can take your names. That helps build connection with you guys. Again, I would like to remind you that if you're preparing for absolutely any exam, such as, let us say, an IAS or an IES or RBI or any of these examinations where economics is an important player or economics is an important subject, then Ecoholics is the platform that you all can interact with. You all can interact with any of our teachers, with any of our mentors. You just need to drop a mail, just give a call, and we'll be available for you for any kind of guidance that you need, right? So moving ahead to the next article, which is about industrial policy, right? Now, industrial policy is back with a vengeance. We have already spoken a little bit about this in the previous week, right? The basic idea of this article is that a lot of governments, embracing Washington consensus, or because of Washington consensus, they had moved away from planning. They had moved away from intervention in the economy, and they had allowed market forces of demand and supply to rule the roost, right? Now what we see more and more is that industrial policy is making a very strong comeback, that the governments are deliberately creating industrial policies, schemes, programs to channelize efforts in a certain direction, to guide the development in a certain direction. They're essentially trying to plan things out, that okay, we need so and so industries to develop, we need so and so products to be produced, we need so and so kind of jobs to be created, we need so and so kind of development to happen, hence we are taking these steps. So your good old planning mechanisms, your good old planning tools are being used to a great extent now again, right? So this is what the article will talk about. So that's what we are saying again, that states are making a comeback, governments are making a comeback in industrial policy making, right? So governments are re-engaging with micro policies. What do I mean by micro policies? right? Like for instance, inflation control is a macro policy, fiscal deficit is a macro policy, but what happens in the renewable energy space, that's a micro policy. What happens in the EV space, that's a micro policy, because you're speaking about a particular industrial sector, right? What happens, let us say, the semiconductors space, that is micro policy. What happens in the electronics space, that's micro policy, because you're focusing your entire attention upon a very narrow segment of the market, right? So we are re-engaging with micro policies. We are trying to improve industrial competitiveness. And how are we doing that? By very infamous good old ways of providing subsidies, right? And protecting domestic industries, and by raising tariffs, right? So these are the exact kinds of policies that we are used to, discouraging. We are used to poo-pooing on. We are used to, talk negatively about. These are the kind of policies that we had adopted throughout 50s, 60s, 70s, and 80s. Of course, the way we had adopted these policies, there were a lot of problems, but yes, we had adopted these policies and then we moved away from these policies. Why is it that the world is adopting these micro policies again? Why is it that you see the involvement of state more and more in these policies? What has changed, right? So what has changed is that 2008 financial crisis has happened, right? And there was a huge slowdown in the global growth, and a lot of countries have suffered a lot. There is a disenchantment with free markets, right? There is rising inequality, right? There is loss of industrial competitiveness in a variety of sectors, in a variety of countries. Jobs have been lost, right? So if free markets is going to produce these outcomes, that your industrial competitiveness gets eroded, or your jobs are lost, or people start getting addicted to opium, which we saw in the last week, which was reported in a Wall Street Journal article as well, that with decreasing manufacturing jobs in America, there is a subsequent or a simultaneous rise in the use of drugs, etc. So if these are going to be the outcomes of free markets, then definitely policymakers are going to be worried about it, right? China's rise, China's industries, China's exports, right? It has absolutely crushed and absolutely destroyed a lot of industries in a lot of countries. Pandemic, disruption of supply chain has taught a very bitter lesson to a lot of countries. There is a climate crisis, there is geopolitical conflict, right? So you see that, if you are in America, then you will be looking at maybe two or three of these factors and say that, boss, I want to develop my own industries and create my own jobs. I don't care about anything else. If you are, let us say, a European country, you may look at a different set of 2-3 factors and you may take the same decision. If you are in India, you may look at a different set of 2-3 factors out of these large factors, and you may take your decisions. But ultimately, it is these developments, these macro trends, mega trends, which is forcing countries to have a relook at the way they are guiding their industrial development, right? So there is a re-engagement with industrial policy that's happening. Both developed countries and developing countries are taking these kinds of steps. Like for instance, the IMF research shows that in 2023 alone, there were 2,500 industrial policy interventions. And if you see the interventions that were done in the developed world, they were 5 times more than the interventions in the developing economies, right? And many elements of these policies are same as last century. For instance, protecting the domestic industries, offering subsidies, raising a tariff wall, and there are new elements as well. What are the new elements? The new elements are basically the new arguments that why we need to intervene. So we need to intervene because there is an ongoing climate crisis that we need to be prepared for. We need to intervene because there are cleaner energy sources that we need to get developed. We need to intervene because we want to make sure that our supply chains are strong and resilient. We don't want a COVID replay happening anytime soon, right? So the theoretical question that you may be asked is that what are we trying to achieve, right? What will change? What is going to happen, right? So what is it that we are trying to do? So the basic idea is that, see, what's happening is that geopolitical conflicts, they are influencing your policy making. The way globalization was happening in the last 3 decades, the next 3 decades is going to be different. Globalization is going to be repurposed. Like for instance, if you are a developed country, right, and if you were benefiting so much from globalization earlier, and now globalization is becoming a headache for you because you are losing jobs, you are losing competitiveness, right? Your GDP is stagnating, your people are not happy, and developing countries are coming and selling their items in your country and benefiting from you. You are not going to be a big fan of globalization or a champion of globalization, right? It's a fact. Now, from an Indian perspective, you can call developed countries hypocrite. You can call developed countries as turncoats. You can call whatever you want to call developed countries. But the real fact is that the politicians in developed countries don't get vote from you. They get vote from their citizens. So they are going to make policies which will make their citizens happy. That is why there is going to be a repurposing of globalization, and we will have to live with it, and we will have to adjust with it, and we will have to make sure that our policies are also aligned in such a manner that it's helping us than helping anybody else. That's the reality of life, right? So the point is that a variety of provocations are making these interventions happen, and we need to see how robust these policy structures are, right? Because these policy structures should achieve what they want to achieve. Like, for example, to give you an example from India, which we are going to reiterate downwards, like for instance, we had this national manufacturing policy in 2011 that wanted to achieve 25% sectoral share for manufacturing. What is sectoral manufacturing share in India today? 15-16%. So was that policy a success or a failure? Failure. That policy was not going anywhere, so Modi government started this Make in India scheme in 2014, again with the idea that manufacturing will have 25% of GDP. It has been 10 years since that scheme or the program was launched, and what is manufacturing share of GDP? Same, no change. Then we launched the PLI scheme, right? PLI scheme is a cheap substitute for a comprehensive industrial policy, because what is PLI scheme doing? It is basically just offering you subsidies for making investments and making production happen in India. That's what it is doing. It's not tackling the entire set of problems that people face. It's just tackling a narrow problem. So do you think that these policies are robust? As per the author, no. We'll be talking about it, right? So speaking about two laws which were made in US. So there is this Inflation Reduction Act that was created in August 2022. And about this act, Nobel laureate Paul Krugman says something like this. He says that, boss, we want to fight climate change with industrial policy. We want to offer a variety of subsidies to businesses and consumers so that they can adopt green technologies. So green technologies are not going to be adopted by themselves because they are prohibitive technologies, costly technologies, unproven technologies. So there is an element of risk involved. So what can you do, theoretically speaking? What can you do to reduce that risk? You can reduce that risk by offering some kind of subsidies. Because subsidies, government is taking on some part of the risk for you, and then you need to take some part of the risk on yourself and start adopting these technologies, which will eventually make these technologies better, less costlier, more efficient, and so on. So initially, when there is a new or a risky technology that needs to be adopted, people will not adopt it by themselves. So government needs to help, and that's what government is doing by offering subsidies. That's what America is doing through this Inflation Reduction Act. A McKinsey study says that $500 billion will be spent in terms of government spending, tax breaks, and subsidies, right? Then there is a second act called Chips and Science Act, again passed in August 2022, again with the idea that we want to build new semiconductor plants in US, and we want to expand existing fabrication units in the US. And again, we will be providing investment tax credit to those who are investing for these kinds of projects, right? So what is it that these two important laws in US, what is it that they're trying to address? A, they're trying to address a China threat to supply chain. B, they're trying to address the problem of job losses and the loss of manufacturing facilities to countries such as China and maybe even, let us say, a Vietnam or a Taiwan, right? And the third thing is that it will put the US on the path of net zero. Eventually we need to reduce our emissions, or we need to be able to bring carbon dioxide out of the air or something like that. So we want to achieve that net zero, so these things will help, right? These challenges hold for India as well. What has India done? India has launched production linked incentive scheme so that domestic manufacturing could be promoted, but the results from this scheme is unsatisfactory, right? First of all, to give you a background, like I said, that our 2011 national manufacturing policy or the Make in India policy both wanted to achieve 25% sectoral share for manufacturing, and both these policies have not been able to do this, at least in the last 10 to 15 years since they have been launched, right? Compelled by pandemic like situation or slowdown, compelled by deteriorating relationship with China, and with the idea that we want to reduce our dependence on China, we launched the PLI scheme, right? So this PLI scheme was launched, but as you can see that the investments that should have come in have not really come in, right? There was a draft industrial policy that was launched in 2023. That draft had a couple of points such as these. The draft spoke about reviving DFIs. What are DFIs? Development Finance Institutions. So if you see the history of ICICI, if you see the history of IDBI banks, so they were development finance institutions. These institutions were created so that long-term financing of projects can happen in India. So we want to revive these DFIs. we want to have cluster based industrial development. Nothing new. Cluster based industrial development is just a fancy word for, let us say, a special economic zone, or a little variant of that, right? So cluster based industrial development, clean energy projects, labor intensive industries, and provide tax incentives, right? But what is the problem? The problem is that that draft has now disappeared. There is hardly any debate or discussion on that draft, and we don't know what's happening on that front. And your PLI scheme, which was supposed to be, like I said, an alternative way of developing things, has hit multiple roadblocks. For instance, 23-24 May, the targets were to attract 50,000 crore worth of investments into this PLI scheme. And what we ended up achieving was only 60%, around 31,000 crores, right? So why is it that the private sector is reluctant to invest in India even while they are finalizing investment plans in other countries? So we really need to, as a government or as a policymaker, really need to sit down with the private sector and understand what is their pain point and solve for those pain points, because right now these schemes are definitely not achieving their targets, right? So this is the broad discussion that you need to keep in mind. A lot of facts have been provided to you. These are not somebody's opinion, in my opinion, right? Whether your IMF research, which says that micro interventions are happening, whether the US laws, or whether the Indian scheme that has been launched and the hard data associated with that scheme in the last 1 year, these are hard facts, right? And if you can bring hard facts into your answers, if you can bring examples into your answers, if you can bring justifications that support your assertions in your answers, then your answers are worthy of marks, or those answers are worthy of appreciation. So just keep that in mind. Try to collect as many examples, as many statistics, as many justifications for your assertions. If you feel that, you know, we are on fantastic path for development, you should have justification. If you feel that no, a lot more needs to be done, then you need to know what the problem is and what needs to be done. Justifications. So you need to have your justifications ready, my friends, right? So I hope that this part is clear. Wrapping up very quickly, talking about what Warren Buffett feels about artificial intelligence. So Warren Buffett says that artificial intelligence is much like nuclear bombs that were exploded in the 1950s. Once those nuclear bombs were exploded, there was no turning back. There is a nuclear arms race that was going on, that is going on, and that threat is ever present, and that genie can never be, you know, captured back in the bottle. Same thing with artificial intelligence's opinion, that now this genie is partly out of the bottle. We cannot really stop the deployment of artificial intelligence. We don't know what are the good and the bad that are going to come out of the deployment of this technology, right? So that's his opinion over here. He is deeply concerned about deep fakes. So he said that I came across images of myself and voice recordings of myself, and it was very difficult for me to say whether it was me or not. It was very difficult for my family to say whether it was me or not, right? So basically this is just one example of the downside of artificial intelligence kind of technologies, right? There is a huge debate going on in policy circles, right? So some people are saying that a wave of white collar jobs are now going to be lost because of artificial intelligence. So you have to remember that when blue collar jobs are lost because of automation, because of robotics, etc. So one kind of, you know, discourse was happening. Now the threat is on white collar jobs. It would be interesting to see how the discourse unfolds itself, because white collar jobs being lost means that the middle class is affected, and you know that across the world middle class is extremely powerful, even though their numbers are smaller, right? So it's going to be very interesting to see how this discourse unfolds. But yeah, one set of people say that yes, jobs are going to be lost. On the other hand, you have JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon, who doesn't have a very negative view. He says that yes, certain jobs will be lost, certain jobs will be created, but overall the productivity will improve. Overall the longevity of our lives would improve. Overall the quality of our lives would improve. Now the question that companies are answering on a day-to-day basis is that what are the kind of jobs that they need to add. Like for instance, there is this example that they have given of a biotechnology company by the name of Moderna. Moderna was involved in the development of a variety of vaccines. You may have heard this name earlier as well. So like for instance, if you are in Moderna and if you are, let us say, a business unit head and you want to create a job and you make a requisition that you want to hire XYZ person in XYZ role, so they will see that what is it that the person is expected to do, and is this the right role to create, or we can create another role which may involve utilization of technology, solving for the same pain point, and creating solutions which are going to have a much greater impact on scale for that company, right? So companies are really evaluating what are the kind of jobs that are getting created, what are the kind of roles that are getting opened up, and what is the role of technology in those jobs. Same is the case at Berkshire Hathaway. Warren Buffett's own company, they themselves are using a lot of AI. But again, to reiterate and conclude, Buffett says that there is enormous potential for good and enormous potential for harm, and I just don't know how that will go. That is going to play out. So this is my entire submission for today, my friends. I hope that you have learned a variety of new things, and your exposure has widened, and your understanding of what's happening in the Indian and the global economy has widened. So I'll take your leave. I'll see you all again tomorrow with a similar kind of discussion. If there is absolutely anything that you need to talk to me, you need to talk to anybody in Ecoholics, you can always reach out to us, right? Please download the app. Notes will be available on the app. Thank you so much, and see you tomorrow. Take care. God bless, and Jai Hind to all of you guys.